almost at the home stretch. We have some great talks still left. Welcome to the AI Dev World main stage. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Rakesh, Senior Data Scientist at PayPal. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Hi everyone. So let me start with something all of us have done. You go to a checkout page, you click on pay, and in the moment that it takes for the website to animate, there is a fraud system sitting somewhere that has to make a decision. Whether you're a good customer, an actual paying customer, or a fraudster wearing a hoodie and acting like a good customer. That decision has to be done in milliseconds before you actually go to the page where you make the actual payment. Now, in this session, I want to tell you how can we make that fraud decision using agentic systems. In this session, I'm going to cover 4 things. 1, what is the new fraud landscape that is happening in payment sector? And how can you have autonomous agents improve the existing fraud protection model? And once you know the fraud, once you know how you have to improve it, how are you actually gonna architect the system to make the decision with high precision, high recall, and low latency? And finally, we'll go through 2 case studies that explains how an agent could or would improve the existing system. Okay, so you see some big numbers here on the screen. But I want to tell you more than these big numbers, I want to tell you how they actually matter. Because the fraud that is happening today and the systems that are there to prevent those frauds is not going to be the same in the future. Because right now, we have fraud prevention systems. But in the future, it's not about fraud prevention, but how are you going to implement a fraud defense? And how are you going to come up with a strategy that's going to do that defense for you in low latency time? So here, you can see that based on the current reports that's been published, your e-commerce fraud is ever increasing. And it's going to keep increasing unless we come up with strategies. Earlier, it was people acting as customers, doing card testings, using stolen credentials. So you have systems in place that protects you from those bad actors. But it's not going to be like that anymore. Now it's going to be like agents or automated bots acting as customers, mimicking customer behavior, and fooling your current systems to do the payment. So now it's on you to come up with strategies to prevent these bots acting as customers. So what are the current tactics that they use? 1, they use phishing techniques to steal your credentials. 2, once they have your credentials, they're going to use bots to mimic customer behavior. 3, they're going to have stolen CCs or debit cards or gift card scams to make those payments as a good customer, and that's going to have you, let's say you're a merchant, right? You have this credit card that is coming in, you think that it's a good customer, and you let the payment through. Now, you're going to end up with losses. Like earlier, 4 years back, when I started in the payments industry, the losses were 2.5 times of the actual payments. Today, the loss is 4.7 times. So every dollar that's lost, you're going to pay 4.7 times, including the fees to your issuers and including the actual product loss. So you lost your product, you lost your payment, and you end up paying fees. So that's how it's going to be like as a merchant working in payment industry. So what does the current systems have? The current systems have a machine learning model that scores a transaction, says, hey, this is a good transaction, let it through. hey, it's a bad transaction, let's block it. And then it's going to have some static rules that says, hey, so now this is coming from a different country that I don't take payments with, so I'm going to block this. Now I have this email or phone number in my block list, so I'm not going to process this payment. So, and then you have policies in place, like, hey, I'm not processing payments from certain countries because they are embargoed, things like that. But moving forward, it's not going to be static because you have to have a strategy that's going to keep adapting to changing patterns. Because a pattern comes in, you have like 100,000, 200,000 transactions coming in, and within that you identify a pattern, and then you block it. When do you block it? You block it after that pattern actually takes place and you identify it as fraud. So now the time it takes for you to identify the fraud and mitigate that fraud is where your actual losses lie. So you have to come up with a strategy as a fraud data scientist or as a fraud agent or developer to protect your merchants from these. And finally, the main thing is, see, if you take a fraud decision in place, you have to make that decision in microseconds or even milliseconds. So you don't have enough time to make this decision to take whatever long you need. With LLMs, when you build those LLMs, you have to consider this in place and make those decisions in sub-milliseconds. And finally, this is a tricky thing with payment frauds, because let's say you block a good customer, right? Your trust in the product by the customer is lost. Now let's say, because you don't want to lose your trust, you end up approving a fraudster. Then again, your merchant's trust in the system is lost. So it's like you do your damn, you don't your damn. So that's the scale that we are working at. So you have to make sure that when you compute or when you do the thresholds, you have to take this into consideration and then make a decision on it. Okay, before moving forward, let's say, what are the types of fraud that are in there in the industry that you'll have to know? Why do you have to know these types of fraud? Is because this is where your attack vectors are going to come from. So when you design a system, you need to understand what is the attack surface that you're going to try to solve. Are you going to solve for all of these? Okay, that's going to be a little tricky, but still it's possible. Or are you going to specify a specific attack vector and you're going to try to come up with a solution for only that one? In this session, I'm going to only focus on the card not present, but I wanted to include the other ones for just the awareness purposes. Okay, what is card not present? Let's say you use Apple Pay, you use Google Pay, you use your card online, or anywhere that you use your card credentials without the actual card being involved. That is your card not present transactions. Then you have card present transactions where you use your actual card to make the payment. Like you tap the card, you do the payment, and boom. So now fraud can happen in either of these cases where a fraud actor could have gotten your credentials from somewhere you made a payment and then use those credentials without the card actually not being present to make an online payment. That's card not present fraud. Then you have card present fraud and you have counterfeit card fraud. So both of these cases is where somehow the fraudster gets access to your actual credit card. Let's say it's lost card, or let's say it's stolen card, or let's say you made a payment somewhere using your actual card and they make a counterfeit card out of it and then makes the payment. So these are the payments that's going to happen under these two categories. Then you have account takeover fraud. So now your actual payment is not lost. Your actual card is safe, but your account credentials is stolen and they use your account to make the payment. Let's say it's an Amazon account where you actually stored your card, so they make the payment without any verifications in place. So that's account takeover fraud. And then friendly fraud. So friendly fraud is actually not a fraud, but customers, they come to the merchants and say, hey, I didn't like your product, I didn't receive your product, I'm not satisfied with your product, so I'm going to return this and you have to issue me refund. Are you not going to issue me refund? Then I'm going to take it up with my card issuer and say, hey, do a chargeback. I didn't receive what I expected, so give me back my money. That's friendly fraud. Now that we know what is the attack surface that we are going to focus on, let's see what are the limits of this fraud detection systems that are there in place, and how are you going to catch up to the scale that the fraud is actually being done. First thing, you have reactive monitoring. You have setups in place, you have models in place, you have static rules in place, you have policies in place to detect fraud. But remember, every time you do the detection, you're doing it at a transactional level. When a transaction comes in, you decide that, hey, is this transaction good transaction by a good customer, or this transaction is coming from a bad vector? So in this case, it's going to be like a reactive approach where you see fraud happening and then you stop it. It can also be like, so let's say when a chargeback actually happens. So how do you say this is a bad chargeback, right? So chargeback doesn't comes in like days. It comes in months. So it takes up to 60 to 90 days for you to know that this was actually a bad transaction. So when you train your model, you're going to train it on that level. So you're not going to train it at an hourly level. But what do we need here? We need was the login by the customer actually a good login. We need that the device from the customer is a good device. We need to know whether their PII information is actually theirs or someone trying to mimic it. So, but the problem is right now, these login events would sit in a different place. The device information would sit in a different place. The customer information would sit in a different place. So you need something that's going to bring in all of these different aspects into one for your agents to work better. Second one, static rules and rigid models. So now you know a pattern is happening. You see that someone is doing a card testing on your website, and you come up with rules to say, hey, when these conditions come into picture, just stop the transaction, don't let it through. And when do you do this? When do you analyze this? After the pattern has already happened. But remember, if it takes you to identify the pattern as being happening, then the pattern actually started a couple of hours ago or a couple of minutes ago. And within that particular time frame, there's going to be like hundreds and thousands of transactions already gone through that would hit the issuer and try to make the payments. And that's where you're going to see your loss happening. You would see that, hey, I limited it to a level and I'm limiting my fraud to a level, but that's not going to be enough in the future because you're not going to see it coming. They're not going to come in with a crowbar on the side and to break your system. They're going to walk right in the front door and mimicking a good customer. And the models that you've trained, they try to identify patterns and they try to come up with a way to score a transaction. Like I said earlier, it's not going to be enough to see just that event being good or bad. You need to identify if that session itself is good or bad. Is the pattern that's going to emerge or that you actually see changing is going to be good or bad. So it's not that the actor is going to act independently to do the fraud. They're going to do a campaign. It's not just one customer. It's not just one device. It's not just one email. It's going to be a collection of all of them trying to act, trying to break your system or trying to break your thresholds to do what they want to do. And finally, delayed response. So when I say delayed response, it's not like, hey, I'm taking like days to make that stop. You may have thresholds in place. You may have ways to identify the patterns and stop that pattern. But what about new patterns? How are you going to stop when they test those thresholds and they're going to try to overcome those hurdles that you put in place and trying to find a way around it? How long do you think it's going to take the fraud to be stopped? Here, you would need at least weeks to identify if that pattern is emerging, and then you come up with static rules, and then you come up retrain your models, and then you put that in place, and then all you can do is stop that pattern from happening. But what can you do to stop the pattern while it's happening is what we are going to cover in this session. Okay, so now I'm going to propose a two-pronged approach. We have all used generative AI, and we know that generative AI is really good at coming up with content. So here, imagine you're a fraud data scientist. You work in a specific fraud being happening for your merchants, and you have to act on different fraud cases. So if you have to spend time going through each of those cases, identifying what happened there and giving an explanation and sending it over in your stand-up or sending it over to your merchant, it's going to take time. So now you have to reduce those times that's being taken for you to generate the reports, so you can focus more on the actual fraud being happening and not just paperwork. So here you can leverage generative AI to create your reports, identify what has happened, identify where it's coming from, identify what you can do next, and then send it over for review, further review by the merchants or by your team to see how you can make this better. So that's one approach, where it's your helper that's going to help you do your job faster. Now, the helper is not enough. You need someone to actually know what's happening and do what needs to be done to stop the fraud as it's going on. That's your agenting system. So you're trying to bring in agents to see how you can monitor the activity, how you can make a real-time decision, and how you can execute these countermeasures to stop the fraud that's actually happening. Okay, before I go into more about the agentic system, I want to cover what's there in the generative AI first. One, your generative AI is going to help you create notes, summarize the alerts, and suggest what can be done next. Next, it can give you like, hey, I'm seeing an alert and I'm flagging it, and you can set it up or automate in such a way that who needs to see those alerts, where these alerts needs to be placed, and who is actually impacted, how much of an impact is this. So all these can be automated using your generative AI approach. And then once you have the documentation, once you have the fraud team look into it, and then you can say like, hey, why has this happened? What made it happen? And how much is the loss? So if you just think about it, there are like three things that you can achieve. One, it provides automation where you can automate the manual tasks that you'll have to do, and you don't have to wait for it. It's already ready for you to review and proceed with an action. Two is when you have an analyst or a data scientist who's actually working on the fraud, and you're helping them be faster at what they do and cover more cases within a short period of time. Three, that's the main problem with this approach, is where this only works after the alert is created. So you have to wait till an alert actually comes in to make a decision or to stop what's being happening. Now if you think about the agentic AI approach, so before I go with this, I have to be a little careful here. I'm not saying that when a payment happens, an LLM is going to approve the payments. It's not like that. I don't want you to set up a system where LLMs come in and approve or reject the payments. That should not be how it's done because of all the policies and governance that are involved there. You need specialists. So let's say you actually do the fraud analysis work. You have to identify where is this device coming from. Is this device a good device or not? Is this card a good card or not? Or is it it's a credential that's been stolen? Or is this email or phone is something that's known to be a fraudster's email, or it's a random gibberish email that is known, or that you think that it's going to do some fraudulent actions. But if you want one person to do all of these, that's not going to be a right way to do it. So you have to see, how am I gonna split these into tasks and create a specialized agent who's gonna do just one bounded task and make a decision on that particular task. So that way, it's not one agent doing all the work, but it's multiple agents doing the work that you want to be done. And now that you know your limits, you can say that, hey, I want to make real-time decisions, and I want this agent to act on its own, and I want to provide high-speed response. That's how you're planning on setting this agent up. Okay, so how can this AI agents improve fraud detection? One, you want an holistic approach where, like I said, multiple agents specializing in certain tasks and doing their tasks in parallel to achieve what you want to achieve. Next, this is an important thing where you have agents doing the work, but can you explain why the agent did what it did? And the third one, can the agent adapt to the emerging patterns and to stop the payments from going through when a pattern is identified? So how is this ecosystem going to look like? One, you need a good signal ingestion and context building base. So you need to know what information is the agent actually going to use and how they can use it. Then, can you reason on why you made that decision? Third, can it make real-time execution with lowest latency as possible? Fourth, how can you train or how can you make these agents learn and optimize their strategies to work as the payments are coming through? So here, there are three words that you have to know. One, sense, think, and act. And the fourth one is learn. What is the heart of the approach here is governance and trust. In payment industry, we work on nothing but trust. So if a trust is lost in the system, then the system is not going to proceed anymore. So what you need to make sure the trust is not lost in the system is that you define the policies and you define the governance to say, like, these are my limitations, these are my boundaries, and this is what I need the agent to act on. So you set those things right, you will definitely succeed in setting up this architecture. So now I want to say, like, how can you actually set up this architecture, right? One, you need to identify what are you trying to solve and solve only for that. Then you want to have a base of data that is available for the agent to use. And it has to be just from one source. So you don't want the agents to go to multiple different sources and take time for them to act on. And third, you want to set up specific boundaries so they act within those boundaries and not across them. Finally, you set up rules and models, and so that the agent can work in parallel. So one thing I want to tell you here is that we are not trying to replace the existing system. We are trying to enhance it. We are trying to make the agent perform better. So there are ways that the cloud providers actually provide that you can use to set up these systems and do the monitoring, do the action, and whatnot. So it's up to you how you want to set up this architecture, but just keep these in mind. So here I want to take through two case studies, but due to the limitation of time, I'll just stick to one. So now you have a large payment processor, and there is a card not present fraud happening. You see that there are false declines happening. So you see that there are good customers being declined and you get complaints. So how can you use these agents to come up with strategies to reduce the good customer impact, but at the same time not letting through bad actors? So here we have seen that introducing these systems can improve your precision by 18% and reducing your false positives by 30%. I'm skipping the case study too, but you can see this in when the presentation is published. Finally, let me conclude what I want to say. In payments, trust is everything. So you lose your trust, then your customers are not going to come back to you. So when you set up these systems, make sure that these systems act the way that you want it to act and not go beyond those boundaries. So make sure your good customers are retained and make sure your fraud is stopped. So I want to conclude on that note that this is a battle against time. This is a battle against agents. So if you're not equipped enough to battle these agents that are gonna come in the future, then you're gonna lose the battle. So make sure when you're setting up these agents, they are equipped with everything that they need to make a decision at the lowest latency time possible. And with that, let me conclude this session. Thank you for listening to my session. If you have any questions or concerns, please share your comments here in this QR code so I can improve the session from here on. Thank you.
Thank you again, Rakesh. Thank you everyone for joining us here at AI Dev World Main Stage. Make your way to your next sessions. If you want to stay here for the next session, make sure you get scanned. Also, forward